Naturally as possible.
As naturally as possible. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode here on Ladies First and another episode of Headspace.
So today we are very happy to have Dr. Elaine Yeo here today to share with us some of her knowledge on mental disorders.
I'm Dr. Elaine. I'm a clinical psychologist from Promises Healthcare. So I primarily work with clients who struggle with anxiety and trauma.
Speaking of anxiety and trauma, do you know that via a survey Straits Times has done, it stated that 2 in 5 Singaporeans have mental struggles, and statistically 1 in 2 youths between the age of 15 to 35 have those mental struggles. Which brings me to our topic for today: how to approach friends in need when they are struggling with mental health.
That's right. I think it's possible to notice some signs that someone around you is struggling with mental health, and it's also very important to, let them be aware that they are struggling and also let them know what are the different avenues to get that help from.
Ko has mentioned also that there are certain traits about people that we can use as points of identification that someone is struggling. So what is some of the examples that you can share with us?
Traits, I think the signs that we can look out for would really differ depending on what mental health condition we're looking at. Maybe in a persistent negative emotional state. So for example, consistently feeling very sad, feeling very worried, feeling very angry. You might also notice some withdrawal from social interaction, right? Someone who used to be very energetic, loves with, hanging out with you, suddenly they're pulling back. Or
like isolating themselves in a way?
Yes, exactly. Or having trouble relating with others. You'll notice those sort of patterns when you hang out with them. They might be using more substances. So for example, drinking more alcohol, smoking more cigarettes.
So those are the more common ones that we typically see across the board.
Maybe they're struggling, whether they've entered the stage of us diagnosing it as a mental disorder. Maybe not yet, but signs of struggle.
So like an initial phase where we can start stepping in to help the person.
Thanks for sharing that. But as you know, mental health is a very sensitive topic, and a lot of people are afraid of judgment. So I would believe my friends would be very embarrassed if they were to experience such symptoms, and they might not want to talk to us about it. How do we approach them? Is there a right way to go about it, or is there some specific things that we should take note of?
The best approach is, first of all, don't bring up mental illness right away, because you don't know if they are actually experiencing a mental illness. You're just noticing them struggle. When you hang out with them, just check in, how are you doing, right? You're probably asking them that anyway as their friend, and then hear them share. And if it seems like everything's hunky-dory, you can gently tell them what you're noticing. Use a lot of I statements, right? I'm noticing that you're looking very stressed, you've been very tired. I notice you haven't been eating as much, right? I'm concerned, I'm kind of worried.
Based on what I've observed, I just want to check in on you kind of approach.
Yes.
Instead of saying, are you okay? You don't look very okay.
Yeah,
which might seem a little bit okay.
Right. If you go something's wrong, then it can create the embarrassment or the feelings of shame. Yeah, so it's more of, from what I can see. Then they have that option to say, oh no, that's what you see, but actually I'm okay. And if they do say that, it's completely fine for you to say, okay, got it, so you're okay, but if anything comes up, let me know.
At least they know someone cares for me.
Yes.
If I really, really am struggling, I know who to go to and I know who I can approach. That sort of manner.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's this friend notices that I'm struggling, then they feel safer.
How important do you think the role of friends are in this whole situation?
Generally, across the board, when we talk about mental health struggles, right, one important, what we call a protective factor, so basically what decreases their risk of potentially having that struggle turn into a mental illness, is social support. Friends is a part of that social support, and that might differ from person to person. For some people, the important social support is family. For some people, it's their partners. Some people, it's friends. I think friends do play a very important role.
Have you come across a lot of people who tend to approach their friends more than their families?
My experience might be a little skewed because for a lot of my clients, they've experienced childhood trauma. Naturally, family is not the safest place for them, so they go to friends or they go to partners.
Right. So it really depends on the
The
circumstances.
person and things like that. It's okay to approach your friends. It's also okay to approach your families. Just whoever that makes you feel comfortable and safe.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
It's the good way to approach.
Nowadays, right, there is a Chinese saying, calling our new generation the strawberry generation.
Easily bruised, basically.
Yeah, so it actually means that young people these days, we can't really take a lot of hardships, and we're just like a strawberry whenever we have some
Squeeze a
hardship.
bit and really the juice will come out, kind of a thing.
Right.
Yep. So like because of this, it's very difficult for people suffering from mental disorders to actually share their experiences to like family members, especially the older generation. So friends are therefore becoming increasingly important, as they would usually be the default person to go to or to confide in.
For example, if like I told my grandma that, oh, I'm very stressed, I think I need somebody to talk to, she'll just tell me, suck it up, because long time ago I brought 6 children from Malaysia to Singapore on my own, yada 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 yada.
Yeah.
That's why I think like it's so hard to approach like older people as well. Is that a very common trait in like, let's say, some of the younger clients that you have?
That is a common narrative that I've heard. To be fair to the older generation, like your grandmother, they probably were also told to suck it up by their own parents. There probably wasn't much awareness or conversation about mental health. There was so much focus on practical needs, providing home, providing food. There wasn't much understanding about emotional needs. For many of my Asian clients, I noticed, it does cross cultures as well. So I don't want to say it's all about, the Asian culture.
I would say that it also depends, right? Like
Yeah.
I feel personally, if I approach like my family, they won't tell me to suck it up.
I honestly think it's just my grandma. Like, Mama, if you're watching this, I love you.
That's a very good point, right? Because it depends family by family.
Correct.
Right, how they were raised, what they learned, what they also read up on their own. Maybe they gathered some information about mental health, right? Maybe through their own experiences, they learn, okay, maybe I need to connect more emotionally with my children, get to learn about their emotions a bit more. Then they might have a different reaction.
And a different understanding of the situation
Right.
as well. So, in a lot of situations nowadays, right, we are very easily influenced by the people around us. If my friend is happy or my partner is happy, I'm automatically feeling super elated. If my friend is sad or my group of friends are like feeling down, I'm also going to feel down, even though I have to be the person to be, in a way, a support system for them to sort of bring them up.
How do we prevent ourselves from being so influenced by other people's negative emotions so that we can also take a breather and not be negative?
Going back to boundaries, what's important first is knowing your own emotional capacity and limits. Different people are different. Some of us are more easily affected by other people's negative emotions than others, and that's totally fine. What's important is that you know that for yourself, okay, this is my capacity, and then you establish those boundaries. And by that, I mean having a conversation. The other thing is to ensure that your own self-care routine, your own coping, and that your own support system, that's all also set in place so that you have things to do, you have people to turn to when your emotions start to get affected. And in fact, when I think about my work as a clinical psychologist, right, a large part of my job is to hold and contain a lot of the overwhelming emotions that people are feeling. The one buzzword that every single person was saying was self-care, self-care, self-care. It's ensuring that we have that in place before we can look after others.
So it's like a care for yourself before you can care for others kind of situation.
Yeah.
Speaking of how other people's emotions and negativity can be an influence on other people, have you ever had clients who come to you just because other people are giving them bad juju or like bad energy?
Yes, actually friends not that common.
Okay.
But I think what comes to mind for me are clients who are they're providing support for their loved ones. Example, parents who may be looking after children who have experienced trauma. Then for the children, that's a lot of overwhelming emotions, and then that's a lot for the parents as well. I've also had adult children coming in because their elderly parent is suffering from dementia, so that can be overwhelming as well. Generally across the board, for a lot of these people, they really, really want to continue supporting their loved one, but it's just so intense for them that they don't know how to do it without getting overwhelmed themselves, right? Without affecting their own mental health. A lot of the work that I do with them is, first of all, helping them understand the difficulties that the person they're caring for is going through, so they have that information on their fingertips, and then talking about strategies to support that person in ways that will not only help the person they're caring for, but also themselves. They don't unintentionally make things worse. Of course, for them to learn some healthy coping strategies for themselves.
I think that sort of knowledge is very important because it's not like everyday knowledge that we all know.
Yeah, you can't read it from like a book.
If they're at risk of hurting themselves or hurting others. So in the case of any sort of mental health crisis, right? So if they tell you they want to end their lives, if they are actively self-harming, or they tell you they want to hurt someone else or they want to kill someone else, these are points where you have to act, right, to protect them and also to protect the people around them. And by act, I mean calling hotlines.
Okay.
There's the SOS hotline, IMH helpline. There's, if absolutely you have to, you can also call 995 emergency services to come down and help out. If the person is open, you can also accompany them to the A&E of the nearest public hospital. And then the medical person on site can then assess them and see if they're safe.
You mentioned A&E. A lot of people have this mindset that, mental struggles is not something that you approach an A&E for because it's not often seen as an emergency of any sort. So if a person is scared to go to an A&E, what should you do?
I think accompanying them is a big factor because then they know that, okay, there's someone I trust next to me. If anything happens, they can help support me.
By now we know that mental struggles can literally hit anybody of any age, but what is the largest age group that has mental struggles, and why do you think that is?
Across various studies that I've seen, generally it's youths and young adults that tends to be the most vulnerable age group for mental health disorders. I think it's probably because youth is a period of transition and change. They're going through a lot of different things. With that comes a lot of additional challenges, additional uncertainty that some other age groups might not be experiencing. For example, with the younger youth, say about secondary school up to about JC, around that period, they're going through puberty. There's hormonal changes. Developmentally, that's also the period when they're starting to try and figure out who they are, who they want to be, so their identity. They're also starting to seek belonging in communities and groups outside of family. Then they start to look at friendships. And then we enter 18 and above. So traditionally for some people, that's when they enter university. For a lot of mental health professionals, that's when we call that age young adulthood, because that's the age when they're transitioning into being adults. And with that comes additional expectations from society that they take on more responsibility. So with all these different challenges and uncertainty and worry about the future, right? Is this the right career path for me? Am I going to be financially stable? Things like that, I think can really help to sort of perpetuate and exacerbate a lot of the stress, which then puts them at a higher risk for mental health disorders.
And there's a lot of change as well because you go from school A to school B to school C.
Yeah.
It's understandable why the youth and the young adults are the ones who face so much struggle.
I'm just talking about developmentally, right? So what we can expect for across all youth, but there's probably individual and unique stressors that each youth is experiencing in addition to that.
So as Amanda has raised before, mental health is a very prevalent issue, right? And it can affect anyone, regardless of age, demographic, gender, or even status. So it's something that we should normalize and talk about and raise awareness versus the current stereotype that it's being like embarrassing right now and like being shunned away.
We've actually come to the end of this episode of Headspace. I hope you guys at home have learned a thing or two on how to help a friend in need. It's okay to ask if someone else is okay. So now I know how to approach a person instead of like, hey, you okay now? You don't look very okay. It's more of like, I see that you don't look very okay.
As naturally as possible.
As naturally as possible. Yeah, not sound like a robot like what we just did then. But yes, thank you so much, Dr. Elaine, once again for being here and sharing so much with us.
Thank you for
I think
having
I've learned
me.
a lot.
Yeah, definitely me too. Do you have any final words for our audience?
I think it importantly is to know that mental illness is not a sign of weakness. It's just as real, just as valid, and potentially debilitating as any physical illness. If you're ill, you see a professional, right? There's no shame in that. If you're experiencing any of the symptoms that we've talked about through these episodes, and if you feel that these symptoms are really stopping you living a life that's rich and fulfilling, then please do seek help.
Thank you guys so much for watching this episode. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure you subscribe, watch our previous video, and we hope to see you in the next one. Bye!